Hi, I'm Armin Budish, and I'm your host today for our version of Cleveland Conversations. Today we have a fabulous interview set up here with two experts on leadership. They're going to talk about what is a leader. And we have Shilpa Kedar, who is the director of the Beth E. Mooney Transformative Leadership Center for Cleveland State University. And we have Rob Whitbred, who is the director of communications for Cleveland State. And it's important to start, I want to start with you, Rob, because you are not only the director of communications here, but you're also a passionate advocate for leadership, and you study leadership. You've made that I don't know if it's a hobby or a part of your job, but you spend a lot of time on it. Tell us how the two intersect. How does communications and leadership, how do they get together?
Thank you for the question. Leadership is one of these areas where if you talk to 10 different people, you're going to get 10 different opinions and definitions. In fact, if you talk to 100 different people, you may get 100 different definitions people talk about. Some of the traditional approaches looked at things like what are the traits such as demographics that are predictive of who is more or less likely to be a leader. Other approaches looked at things like what are psychological dimensions such as intelligence, such as empathy, such as integrity. Another group of people looked at how leaders may adapt their behavior depending on the given circumstances. Well, in the field of communication, we take an approach where we feel leadership is about motivating, it's about inspiring, it's about persuading. It's about trying to earn the credibility of those who are followers and using communication skills and techniques to try to make that happen. Stated a different way, in the field of communication, we oftentimes suggest that being a leader is a privilege that is essentially bestowed upon a person by those whom are quote-unquote followers, and it's incumbent on that leader to earn that trust on a moment-by-moment, day-by-day basis.
I think it's interesting you use the word inspire and inspirational in your answer because, I picture, a football coach, like a Nick Saban or somebody, speaking to energize the troops, if you will, and inspiration is what it's all about. Is that key to leadership, Shilpa?
I would say that inspiration is clearly an important element of what a leader does, because building teams and bringing them along is a huge piece of what leaders do. And those who can inspire others, who can bring people along and together, are clearly doing a great job as leaders of their organizations, their companies, their block clubs, their sports teams, all of them.
You are the leader of the Beth Mooney Center for Transformative Leadership. What does that organization do?
So first, it's not an organization per se, but a center within the university.
Yeah.
And what I would love to stress is the fact that it is a university-wide center with the intent of touching every discipline, every school, because we believe that leaders are needed in all aspects of life and society, which means you need leaders in the public sector, you need leaders in the nonprofit sector, you want engineers to become leaders of the companies that they work in, and you want engineers to be the leaders of their departments or the projects that they are working on. The same applies for social workers. The same applies for the arts, right? A film director is a leader directing people, resources, and a whole production.
So I'm going to ask both of you. I'll let Rob go first. How do you train leaders?
The starting point is to get people to understand that leadership does not involve simply making statements, making pronouncements, articulating your vision, although those can be very important things. So as an example, if I write a mission statement or I lead a process to develop a strategic plan, you end up with something on a wall, you end up with a document, you end up with some artifact that oftentimes becomes the end-all, be-all in and of itself. What people lose sight of is that the success or failure of a strategic planning initiative, the success or failure of implementing a new mission or vision for an organization ultimately depends on the day-to-day actions, activities, decisions, behaviors of the people who are the members of that organization. And as soon as you sort of get that mindset in place, then you start shifting into what are the different skills you should be training to get people to try to enact these given behaviors. So we talk about things as basic as giving an effective presentation in front of a large group. That inspires credibility, that inspires confidence in a leader.
That's one of the ways communication
Absolutely, yeah.
pairs with leadership.
Absolutely. We talk about things, there's a robust field of scholarship that shows leaders frame messages differently than non-leaders. They use more inclusive language. They use more effective, positive messaging. They take into consideration those impacted by a decision when they're messaging whatever this decision may be. They also try to get people to understand why this is in their best interest to act and enact these behaviors as well.
To buy in.
Exactly.
If you don't have followers, you don't have leaders.
So I just tell you what to do, and you do it because you have fear of punitive sanction. That is essentially an exertion of formal authority. That is not, at least from our perspective, leadership, because leadership involves motivating and persuading people to give of themselves and their talents towards whatever that objective may be. And those are trainable skills.
Dr. Whitbred started by saying that if you have 10 people, you'll have 15 views of leadership, basically. Do you agree with what Rob talked about, or how would you talk about training leaders?
So I would like to take a few steps back
Yeah.
and say leadership potential is inherent in all of us, right? So the Mooney Center truly believes that all Clevelanders, broadly defined, have a lot of leadership potential, and our job as the higher education institution is to ignite that. It is partly, like Dr. Whitbred said, about exposing the students to the skills that leaders tend to exhibit, the behaviors, the habits that successful leaders are exhibiting, but it is also primarily about experiential learning. Our job as a higher education institutions, the job of faculty, is not so much to just train them, but it is more to facilitate the leadership development journey of our students.
Let me stop you on experiential teaching or training. What does that mean? How do you do experiential training as a school?
Correct. So it can take a number of forms. It could be the case study method, where you are literally walking in the shoes of a leader and understanding how he or she made the decisions that he or she made, and what the ethical, legal complications might have been, and literally living and breathing through that case study model. Mm-hmm. The other would be something like a hackathon, where you are working in an intense 48-hour period, and you're trying to solve a real problem of the Cleveland community, and you're solving it with the nonprofits who might be working on solving those problems, whether that is food insecurity or infant mortality, working across disciplines, engineers, social scientists, working together to solve real problems in the community is very powerful. And if they don't get a chance to do that while they are on campus with us and experience it, the challenges and the joys of collaborating across disciplines, it is just going to get harder for them to do so out in the real world. So our job is to facilitate opportunities like that. And then the regular ones of internships and externships and shadowing, job shadowing, all of those are also tools in the experiential learning bucket.
And Rob, when you're teaching communications, whether it be verbal, speaking, or writing, do you focus on ways to train people to do leadership, to be a leader in the way they communicate?
Well, we have existing curriculum which explicitly focuses on those things. And this brings up one of the challenges of, at least from my perspective, where the quote-unquote field of leadership is and what the contributions of the Mooney Center, the potential of it may be. So right now, we offer a class or two in leadership. Let's say the business school, I'm sure, offers a class or two in leadership. Different places have these various things, but they tend to be only available or mostly available to the students that are majoring in those given areas. A second challenge in the leadership field is we know a lot, right? There's been a ton of scholarship, we've learned a lot, we can talk about a lot, but how do people access that knowledge and those skills? Well, some of the training courses, once you get out of the university setting or an academic setting, are expensive. There's fees to take these courses, and not everyone can afford these fees, and that becomes an impediment and tends, only certain people that have frankly, the economic ability to afford said courses get access to those continued skill developments. The Mooney School, my understanding is you have a concept called the democratization of leadership, offers a path forward to address those very real concerns, which will be to the benefit not just of the students getting exposure to those skills and those training opportunities, but ultimately to the community as a whole.
Absolutely, Robert is absolutely right. We are all about democratizing leadership, which means you don't have to be one of the chosen few to go to a leadership program, right? We believe that leadership development needs to be accessible to all, and we believe that it needs to be embedded in the core curriculum of what the students are studying at the undergraduate levels. Robert is right that very often you have leadership programs in the business school. In most universities, you'll typically find the business school being the lead on that. And I know that here at CSU, Levin takes a pretty active role in developing leaders for the nonprofit and public sector. And many of these programs are either as offered as continuing education or are meant for graduates. But to take leadership development concepts and apply it at the undergraduate level is truly going to have a very significant impact on the region, because every student graduating from CSU in a few years would have learned the basic concepts and would have practiced them during their time at CSU.
So you've talked about having everybody trained for leadership. And you've said pretty much the same thing, Rob. My question is, I can understand that in the fields of public policy, government, education, business even, but how do you teach leadership to an engineer who's spending his time or her time learning the concepts of engineering, or somebody who's a physics major, or somebody who's a math major, or somebody, I don't know how leadership comes into play there. Either one of you can answer that.
Yeah, let me give you an example from my background. Back when I was a graduate student, I was at University of Illinois, and one of the first projects that I was involved with was working with the engineering department, and we were supposed to provide group and team facilitation skills to engineering majors. Now understand what happened here, which is you have a curriculum at that time that was 100% based on individual competitive dynamics. Individuals trying to succeed, oftentimes at the expense of others, kind of a Lord of the Flies type approach. When they did their exit surveys of those hiring their graduates, the results boiled down to very highly technically skilled but can't work well with others. Enter a facilitation approach to try to improve these problem solving and these facilitation skills. Between you and me, the first pass at that was an absolute catastrophic failure, because you can't undo years and years and years of a cultural development process in one final semester project. So that had to be reconfigured and redone a more systematic way. What I'm getting at is leadership in that setting is problem solving, consensus building, compromise, getting people who may not necessarily wish to be on the same page as far as what a project is going to be, which last time I checked is what the expectations are in the quote-unquote real world outside of universities. So oftentimes people think of leadership as this sort of abstract, almost glamorous concept that doesn't have anything to do with the day-to-day realities of what people are doing. Leadership is about progressing, knowing what to do, managing situations in an effective way, and that's to a large extent what the Mooney Center is trying to get at with that, is providing those skills to do what you're doing today in a much more effective way.
And starting really early, starting as soon as the students arrive on campus, whether it is for engineering or for any of the other disciplines. So when you start embedding and you start the students off on a leadership journey, development journey of their own at a very early stage, you have a much better chance of breaking down the cultural barriers that may have been, from a very long time, and really building and facilitating the leadership skills for the students.
So will the Mooney Center be working with the professors in physics and in engineering and in math,
Yes.
and in order to build into their curriculum as opposed to a leadership curriculum laid over it?
A combination of both. So it makes a lot of sense for there to be some common resources and some common courses that students can take in different, at the undergraduate level. And then as the students go from undergraduate to graduate, if they wish to take on more specific courses, then yes, we are already working with faculty in engineering, faculty in arts and films to create, and health, to create curriculum that is specifically designed for that discipline or that industry. And it's as simple as there's a lot of common curriculum overlaid with case studies that involve a healthcare leader or an engineer who became a CEO, and a lot of it can be customized to their discipline.
So if an engineer comes up with a concept, it's still important that the engineer be able to lead people to and get people to buy into the concept, not just throw it out there.
Exactly.
What is the benefit, in your view, of this leadership training to the general community?
It goes back to the impact that I believe we can have as CSU, given the number of graduates that we put out every year, given the fact that 80% of our graduates stay in this area beyond their graduation, given the fact that we tend to attract students that are from this area. It means that over time, we will change the way the region is able to think more as a leader, whether that is in manufacturing or in the public sector or in the arts. We will then be infusing leaders throughout the university, throughout the community, right? Whether they end up becoming block club leaders or they end up becoming leaders of their organizations or Fortune 500 companies, the overall community will really benefit from that.
Having been in the community, I agree with you 100%. I think that our future as a community is dependent on leadership for the community, and that can be beneficial in a number of ways. And so I applaud your efforts here.
Thank
and
you.
your efforts, Rob, to develop leadership. I have a question as to we've all heard the expression born leaders. And I'm curious, we've spent most of our time talking about how do you develop leaders. Are leaders also born to be leaders, or is this development of leaders basically the only way to do it?
There's no question that one can make the case depending on, and excuse me for sounding like an academic for a moment here, but one can make the case depending on the theoretical perspective you're taking that people are born with naturally more innate leadership skills. Some people are naturally more charismatic than others, and charisma is one working definition of leadership. Some people have a higher level of intelligence in given areas, be it mathematics, be it the arts, be it given sorts of things. That can be considered a trait that can be a type of leadership. That being said, there's also very little argument that regardless of what somebody's unique abilities and talents may be, leadership skills can be developed well beyond where most where people are quote unquote starting from in that area.
I would 100% agree. Leaders are made, right?
Well, I have done a little research of my own on leadership in preparation for our conversation, and I came across a discussion with Vince Lombardi, who's a Hall of Fame coach, and he firmly stated that leaders are made, not born. And out of all people, I would have thought he would have said, I would have thought he was a born leader, and yet his view is that you make leaders, that leaders are trained.
And most of the time when you read biographies and autobiographies of folks who were quote unquote born leaders, what you're reading about is an incredible work ethic, an incredible dedication to develop talents, to develop abilities, and then present them in an effective way, which is kind of sort of what we've been talking about a lot today.
Good. Shilpa, you asked for a minute or two at the end of our conversation to talk a little bit about how people in the community can help us.
Correct. No, I'm so glad that you are asking that. I would say that the community can help us in two significant ways. One is, I believe the Mooney Center is there for all students to learn leadership. I want to be very intentional about making sure that the center is also serving minorities, is also serving women, because if you look at the Fortune 500 companies, very few are minorities, very few are women, and that's not okay. And I want to make sure that we're doing that, so people who believe, have the same ethos as I have, as the center has, please come forward and give ideas, tools, tips on how we make sure that we are engaging the women in the community and in the student body to become leaders. The second thing I would say is, if you're an alum or you just care about leadership, we want to be in touch with you. We want to see how you might want to engage with CSU students and add value to them, whether that is some kind of a communications training program. We need people to sit in the audience so that somebody can be practicing their presentation, practicing their pitch. An engineer still needs to sell his ideas, right? We need people to give feedback to the presenters, right? In a thoughtful, nurturing, constructive kind of way. We need people to serve as mentors. We need people to say, hey, I'm happy to have a few students shadow me, or I'm happy to have a few students, do a mini internship, micro internship, or a micro something or the other. It can be as small as that. But we need alums and those who care about leadership development to come in and volunteer their time, their talent. I will not say no to treasure, but time and talent is extremely important.
How do they get in touch with the Mooney Center?
That is great. So I would say the search for the Beth E. Mooney Center on the CSU website.
Great. And there's a way you can,
Navigate to the website and then get in touch with me.
Right.
There is a form, all of that.
perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rob, what do you have to close with?
I would just echo what Shilpa has said and say I'm looking forward to seeing what happens next.
Well, I have a feeling you'll be doing more than seeing what happens next. You'll be helping get us there. So thank you both for getting involved. Leadership training is so important, and it really is the future of our community. So thank you both for what you're doing.
Thank
and
you.
that is this week's Cleveland Connections. Thank you very much for watching.